This is April Federico with Brownies for Breakfast, and here today I have Amelia Sherry. Amelia is a New York-based registered dietitian as well as a certified diabetes counselor and education specialist. She is also the author of Diet Proof Your Daughter, a mother's guide to raising girls who have happy, healthy relationships with food. She practices from a non-diet, weight-inclusive perspective. So welcome, Amelia.
Hi, April. Thank you for having me.
Course. Yeah, so what inspired you to become a registered dietitian in the first place?
I think I have a story that's kind of similar to a lot of RDs. Well, maybe not all, but a lot. I worked in health and nutrition and fitness for many years. I worked as a journalist for women's magazines, and I also just had just real deep personal interest in understanding what I was eating and, to be honest, how it was impacting my weight at the time. And so eventually I decided to go into back to school and study nutrition, and I became a dietitian that way.
Amazing. And so you authored Diet Proof Your Daughter, a mother's guide to raising girls who are happy and living just healthy lives and just sans diet. As someone who was who was introduced to diet culture in literally second grade, I can totally feel this wholeheartedly, the pressure to be absolutely skinny and to just like fit in with society standards. How did that book come to life? Did you have any inspiration?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. My So to go way back, so I initially had issues with my own eating issues when I was growing up, like I think so many people can relate to. I had a lot of eating issues. I fortunately got well and healed my relationship with food. It was a long journey. Um, I got in a good place with eating and stopped obsessing about my weight. And then I became a mom, and I was like, okay, my girls are gonna have, be healthy, air unquote, eaters. And I didn't really think about that very deeply until one day when my oldest daughter was asking me for some extra food. She was asking me for toast. I actually talk about it in the beginning of my book. And I noticed that she was just feeling really kind of embarrassed about it. Like there was a lot of shame in her voice. She was asking me for more for seconds, and I had no patience, and I was kind of irritated by it. And I just realized that whatever she was feeling about wanting more was probably something I had transmitted to her, through my own kind of, I recognized, I guess, what I had felt when I was younger, asking my mom for more food and her kind of being discouraging about it. And I didn't know what to do with that. I realized maybe there was something I was doing wrong in feeding my daughter. Meantime, at work as a dietitian, I'm a pediatric dietitian. I was working with families all the time to help them, again, air quotes, eat healthy. And I realized that a lot of the strategies that I was teaching them and the ideas about food that I was teaching them were challenging for parents as well. Like they had one idea of what was healthy in their mind, but then what I was telling them wasn't really in line with that, or what I was telling them to do, which essentially was to be a little more relaxed about food and to have more structure to meals and less like expectations in terms of what they ate. That was challenging for parents as well because they had their own eating issues. And that's sort of how the book came to be. I started to practice nutrition in a different way. I started to address eating issues with parents, what their relationship was like with food, what their history was with food, and what actually they wanted for their child. We started to be more intentional about it. And then I ended up sharing a lot of those stories through the book. The book initially was all about how to raise a healthy eater. And then I had to really delve deep into what that actually meant in my mind and look at, is it really about what my child or daughter was going to eat, or how she was going to feel about her eating, and how she was going to behave around food, and like her behaviors and her essentially her relationship with food was really what was at stake, and what I wanted to make sure was, just as good as it could be.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I know when I become a mother, I am definitely going to teach my daughters, if I have any, to, just feel comfortable around, um, just eating in general because like like I said, in second grade, I was basically taught to not eat a whole lot. And I remember I had this one friend and she she was in great shape at the time fourth grade hit. Like she had muscles, she had all that. And and I just remember being in her basement and she recommended that I go on her exercise bike. Like she wasn't body shaming or anything like that. She was just trying to give me helpful tips. But looking back on it, how impressionable could, someone who's in the 8 to say preteen range be, especially by the media. Did you feel any pressure by the media at all?
When I was a child, do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know about, did you say you were in fourth grade?
I was introduced to diet culture in second grade.
Oh, okay.
Um, it just kind of built on, and then a little personal story of mine. I developed anorexia nervosa in eighth grade because of how bad bullying was getting, and I just felt so much pressure to be skinny.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. And you're not alone, unfortunately. Um, I, um, I'm not surprised to hear that because we have, from research, we know girls as young as 5 are concerned about their weight. And they're thinking about dieting or at least cutting back and restricting. Your initial question was, did I start that young? I think you were asking me, or was the media an influence? I
Ab-
can't say consciously it was, but absolutely unconsciously, I'm sure. I mean, it's everywhere, right? We see it in advertisements, it is in television shows, it's in cartoon characters, it's in films. We see it in when I was younger. I grew up in the 80s. I'm a lot older than you. My mother was constantly on diets and really not ashamed about it the way now I think we have a little more self-awareness to know, hey, what are we communicating? But in the 80s, everyone was, not everyone, but many people were on Weight Watchers and doing workout videos at home, and I witnessed that in my mother all the time. So for sure, from a very young age, I was well aware that there was sort of almost like an obligation to stay fit and be thin and watch what I eat. That was kind of the feeling in the ether out there, and I definitely absorbed it, and it definitely impacted me in a very negative way. And that's what Diet Proof Your Daughter. It's meant to help prevent, in our daughters and future generations.
Amazing. Yeah, I admire you for that so greatly. And you are also a certified diabetes counselor and education specialist. So how did that come to be?
Well, I worked in a large New York hospital in pediatric endocrinology. So I was dealing with children that were faced with type 1 and type 2 diabetes all the time. So I sought out the credential to be better support to them in that setting. And that also really being in that setting where children are referred to endocrinology usually for many reasons, but once they get to the dietitian or nutritionist, it's usually because to help them with being at one side or the other of the weight spectrum or the BMI spectrum. So kids who are identified as being as much higher BMIs or much lower BMI. So for growth issues, and sometimes when they're at the higher BMI, then the doctors start pointing fingers and running tests for type 2. So I really wanted to understand diabetes a lot better. And yeah, that's been really I've really loved working with those kids and those families. The extra education about diabetes, especially from a weight inclusive or a non-diet perspective, has been great for it's been helpful for people whether they have type 2 or not, I should say.
Yeah, and this is kind of the core of what our conversation is going to be. So like personally in my coaching, I focus on the no diet perspective. And I know you do too as well. So how do you go about that? Like how do you go about the non-diet um
Sure.
like
How do I practice nutrition for people with
yeah,
type 2 from a non-diet perspective?
yeah.
Is that the question? Yeah. Well, we focus on habits. We focus on what we can actually do to directly impact blood sugar and risk factors for type 2. We do not focus on body weight. So we never, it's a lot of hard work and can be a heavy lift for people who are very focused on weight. And of course, the healthcare, majority of healthcare is focused on let's get your weight down and that'll quote unquote cure whatever disorder you have, particularly type 2 or insulin resistance. And that is not the approach I use at all. We have to take weight out of the equation because we know when we approach activity or eating with the intention of influencing our weight, we end up with a lot of negative byproducts. We don't want to get in a battle with trying to push our weight down. We don't want to approach eating with the sole idea of trying to impact our body weight because it really, really mucks up our relationship with food, our eating behaviors. So many things can go awry, and I can go on and on about what they are. So we want to really put that to the side. So we want to take our weight off the table and just really focus on things that actually can help us balance our blood sugar, reverse insulin resistance, if that's possible. Many of these things are genetically linked as well. So we're going to be at higher risk just for the mere fact of the family we're born into, and we can't change that. We don't want to change that, of course. So we focus on the things that we do have a little more control over,
Mhm.
which is basically habits. So that's how we do it. We focus on the things that, what coaching is like. So first we have to provide some education and understand what actually does impact our blood sugar, and then work together to think partner, to think what actually of these things do we want to start talking about? Do we want to start talking about doing more movement? How can we do it in a positive way that feels good? Or do we want to talk about meal planning and what we're actually eating, or what we're drinking, things like that?
Amazing. And what tips would you give to mothers who may have a daughter who actually may be, on the who well, let's put it this way. Like when I started to gain weight in college, my mom was really concerned about my weight. And she and my dad were worried about my health. And because I was delving into things like, as a college kid, like alcohol and and I fortunately stopped. I'm sober now, but I yeah, they were just so concerned about my weight. And then eventually I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes last February. And I wonder if you have any advice to mothers who may be concerned about their daughter's weight, or how they might approach it, or how they might approach like their daughter's concern for losing weight. I know that's like a really long question, but if you could do your best to answer, that'd be great.
Yeah, so that's sort of many questions and many things in my mind. So first of all, if you're a mother and you're concerned about your daughter's weight or her health, then I know that is always coming from a beautiful place and wanting to help your child. The very first thing to be the best help to your child would to be really to get some education and a better understanding about how weight and health are related, or actually how they might not be as related as we think. Most importantly, that again, what I was saying earlier is that when we really lean in to trying to control our weight, we end up with a lot of negative byproducts like poor relationship with food, yo-yo, our weight cycling, our weight going up and down. Um, Usually when we try to control our weight with food, we end up with lots of restriction, limiting, all kinds of shame, lots of internal chaos and feelings about food. So we really don't want to try to diet down and really focus on weight. Unfortunately, weight and health are very interconnected in our minds in particular, in our culture. So we want to really, what I encourage parents I work with is to really separate those things. Understand that focusing on controlling weight is not going to be beneficial, and really focusing on what actually can help your child or your daughter with her health. Health is not just also physical health, it's emotional health, social health. So what other things can we do to really help your daughter? And really let's not emphasize focusing on weight loss. And let's think about other things we can help, because there is a huge risk of eating disorders. There is a lot of, it's another probably conversation, but it's very much related. When you start to want to help your daughter lose weight, you're essentially saying, like, you'll be better off if you're at a different size or in a different body. You're not actually addressing the behaviors that are impacting their health at all. For example, possibly drinking, other maybe risky behaviors, how they're coping with stress, how is their mental health? Do they have resources for that? Where's their self-esteem? What are their relationships like? Those are all things that can really help your daughter a lot with her overall health, much more than focusing on weight. If your daughter's coming to her, this is like another sort of question that was interwoven in your question. Like, if your daughter's worried about her weight, that is also something that's important to address. One of the things that I encourage a lot of parents to do is not to minimize your child's concern about their weight. We don't want to, it's very, the knee-jerk reaction, and I've had it myself, is just say, oh, there's nothing wrong with your weight. You're great. You're beautiful the way you are. You're great the way you are. And sort of maybe try in one way to make them feel better. However, I don't find that to be helpful. If your parent has ever said that to you, in one sense, oh, great, they're not worried about me. But in another sense, it just minimizes what you're experiencing. Because if your daughter's worried about her weight, she is experiencing usually an intense pressure from culture to be in a body that's different than what she's in. And we want to acknowledge that and help her deal with it, put it in perspective. Yes, that pressure's out there. But I don't want you to engage in dangerous behaviors in order to conform to meeting a certain standard. And I'm using very highfalutin language. That's not how you talk to your daughter. But hey, what's this really about? What are you really want to do? You want to feel happier? Okay, do you think dieting is going to make you happier? Like, what is dieting all about? We can talk about all the harms of dieting. Dieting is really stressful. And dieting is basically saying, I'm not good enough the way I am. And dieting is actually not a way to enhance our physical health at all, or reduce our risk of diabetes at all. So really sussing out what's true and what isn't, what's pressure from culture, and maybe what would be in your daughter's best interest to really get what she's seeking out of life. There's a lot of soul searching with this. We often, and I apologize for going out. You can tell how passionate I am about this, going on this long tangent, but often, I talk about it a lot in my book. Like, we're searching, when we are dieting, we're searching for something else. That was my experience, just trying to feel more comfortable in my skin. I thought trying to be in a smaller body was going to make all this discomfort in the world, go away. And that was sort of like a false God or a false goal, right? Like, I could become, there's people in thinner bodies who are extremely unhappy. There's people in larger bodies who are extremely well adjusted and extremely healthy and happy. So that was just kind of aiming at the wrong goal, I think, in a lot of ways. So I really want to uncover what's underneath your daughter's desire to lose weight. That was the longest answer I've ever given to a question. I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologize. I mean, I could go on forever about this too. I mean, and I think it's really important for mothers and even daughters to understand, like, and just young girls in general to like realize that, you know, how do I phrase this? Like, um, yeah, how do I phrase this? Obviously this isn't my specialty, but like I yeah, to just, you know, not minimize, like you said, like your daughter's like pressure to lose weight. Is yeah, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to minimize what your daughter's feeling because it is out there. It doesn't, what I always like to say, and what I've said to, my daughter and to a lot of my patients and clients, to young girls, is like, just because the culture we live in is, promoting smaller, thinner bodies as being better, doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that that's a value that we need to embrace. I've never chosen a friend, because one is thinner than the other. Yes, there's a certain like social cachet to being, beautiful and thinner. Those are values in culture, but that's not how I value my children. And that's not how I want my children to value other people. So I think being realistic about it being out there and also calling it out for what it is and where it really how wrong it is and where it really falls in line with your own family values is important conversation to have. Much better than, hey, don't diet, it's not good for you, or hey, you look good the way you are, stop worrying about it so much. I mean, I think I personally, from my family, got a lot of mixed messages where it was like, don't worry so much about what you look fine. And also, be careful. I don't know if you really want to eat that because like if you have too much, like it was a weird kind of contradiction. And that can be really confusing for kids. We give mixed messages. That's why as a parent, it's good to kind of really explore where we stand with food as well, and what we're really going for when we talk about wanting our daughters to be healthy, and even ourselves, like, oh, I want to be healthier. People say that to me all the time, but what does it actually mean? Does it mean having better relationships? Does it mean having a better A1C, or never getting diabetes? Like, what does it mean to you? Because it can mean many things. Unfortunately, in our culture, often it means when we say we want to get healthy, we mean we want to get thin, right? That's like the kind of undercurrent to it. And that's what we have to be careful too when we talk to our kids. Like if you ask a child what they think, not every child, but I've asked many kids in my practice, when they tell me they just want to be healthy, I'll say, what does that mean to you? And I get really interesting answers. And often it's around being, thin. It's again, not a goal that we want to be striving for at all.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And yeah, just to kind of wrap up because we're almost out of time. Where can my listeners find your book and how can they find you?
Oh, thank you for asking. My book is called Diet Proof Your Daughter. It's available. Well, first of all, you can go to my website, which is Nourish Her. So it's Nourish Her with 2 H's.com. You can find it there, but through there you'll get a link if you want to look on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org. You can order it at any of those places. And if you want to find out more about me or some of the programs and workshops that I run with moms, you can again visit nourisher.com, and you can link to everything I have to offer there. You can sign up for my newsletter as well. That's what people usually start by doing.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast. And yeah, and be sure to buy her book.
Thanks, April. I appreciate the support and great work with your podcast. I'm glad it's out there.
Thank you. Okay.